This is an unofficial fan production and is in no way associated with the BBC. Doctor Who Timeless Tales Duggan Home for Christmas. Written and read by Ross Wilson. It was the night before Christmas, and all through London, not a creature was stirring, except for Duggan. Wrapped in his favourite trench coat, the weary detective trudged through the snow-clad streets, wondering what exactly he'd done to deserve this. Christmas was always an interesting time of year for private detectives, but this year had really snatched the shortbread. He'd spent the last few weeks rushing around, drawing upon his years of detective experience to help clueless spouse after clueless spouse find the perfect gift for their other half. It was far from his favourite type of job, but work was work, and money was money. The Christmas shandy wasn't going to pay for itself. But that wasn't to say he hadn't put in any effort. His festive shopping advice had been thoroughly successful, save for the couple who had informed him they'd be filing for divorce in the new year. Whether or not that was a result of his action was not something he wanted to consider. But now, as the remaining hours of the 24th drifted away like snowflakes in the wind, Duggan found himself on his way to meet one final client. This particular client had reached out to him in late October, offering a hefty sum of money in exchange for one simple thing. Find her son's dream Christmas gift. At first, Duggan felt insulted. Was that really all he was capable of? Sure, he was no Sherlock Holmes. He was barely even a Lestrade. But Duggan had something they didn't, aside from the fact he was real. He was the most important man in human history. He'd travelled in time. He'd met a green one-eyed alien. He'd punched that green one-eyed alien in its green one-eyed face. Granted, the time travel wasn't his doing, and the discovery of the green one-eyed alien wasn't something he could take sole, or really any, credit for, but the punch was absolutely 100% pure Duggan. And without the punch, mankind would never have even existed. But now, only a few months later, he was being asked to find a Christmas present for a 9-year-old boy. His talents were being wasted. Of course, he'd had no way of knowing just how difficult the assignment would be. If he had, he might have been willing to forego the festive shandy, just this once. The gift he had been tasked with acquiring was a costume, that of Captain Dauntless, fictional space pilot and brave defender of Earth from the fearsome Zorgathorn threat. Dauntless was the star of innumerable comics, cartoons. He'd even released a hit song, We Wish You a Dauntless Christmas. Every child in the country, and many of their dads, would be hoping to see a toy zapper gun or model spaceship nuzzled under the tree on Christmas morning. Duggan assumed, therefore, that any Dauntless-related memorabilia would be easy to come by. He assumed wrong. Toy zappers and model spaceships warmed store shelves right through the festive season, but the very item he needed, the costume, was nowhere to be seen. A deeper investigation enlightened Duggan to the fact that he was not the only one struggling. It seemed the suppliers had vastly underestimated the demanders, and had produced far fewer costumes than were needed. They'd made plenty of Zorgathon costumes, of course. The fearsome aliens with their blue skin and 6 eyes made for a striking visual, but it seemed kids just didn't want to dress up like them. They wanted to be the hero. Duggan could respect that. He didn't look back wishing he'd been the green one-eyed alien. He'd been happy doing the punching. The upside of the shortage meant that Duggan could finally put his detective skills to good use. He searched high and low, meeting with contacts from the shadiest corners of the country, each day edging closer and closer to his prize. And then, he did it. In the early hours of Christmas Eve, in a soggy Edinburgh backstreet, Duggan handed a thick wad of notes to an enigmatic toy collector in return for the most valuable item in his collection. Apparently he had bought 2 costumes, one to be displayed and one to be kept mint in packaging, for posterity. But upon hearing the price Duggan's client was willing to pay, posterity suddenly seemed a lot less rewarding. Duggan, on the other hand, hadn't been quite so keen to complete the transaction. He had just handed over a small fortune, more money than he'd ever seen in one place. Granted, it wasn't his money, and it wasn't up to him to decide what to do with it, but he couldn't help but feel it would be better spent literally anywhere else. He kept thinking this through the entire journey home, back to the snow-clad streets of London where he was to meet this client for the final time. When he found her, standing by a sleek black car, dressed in the longest fur coat he'd ever seen, he couldn't help but wonder just how she'd come into such wealth. The amount of money she'd spent on this gift for her son had been astronomical, yet she hadn't even thought twice about throwing it away on some novelty kid's costume. It was admirable that she would do such a thing for her son, but it also stank of privilege. She could afford to throw that money away on a whim. There was no joy on her face when Duggan handed over the costume, just satisfaction. A job well done. Duggan attempted to mirror her steely professional expression for the duration of the meeting, but he couldn't resist the slightest smirk when she handed him the envelope containing his fee. When he returned to the office, he tore the envelope open and spread the money across his desk. It wasn't quite as much as had been paid to the collector, but he really couldn't complain. He could go wild on the shandy this year. But as he sat, sipping from the fruits of his labour, he couldn't help but wonder what he'd do next. For the first time in a while, he wasn't desperate for money. No longer was the roof over his head in constant jeopardy. No longer would he have to spend every waking moment trying to remember which husband was divorcing which wife. Now, he could do whatever he wanted. He picked up the newspaper and flipped through. After a while, something caught his eye. An art exhibition in Paris, showcasing various old paintings, some thought lost, and some never known to have existed in the first place. Duggan shuddered. That all sounded very familiar. It couldn't be. Could it? No, it couldn't. Unless... Duggan thought hard. Last time he'd been to an unusual art exhibition in Paris, he'd ended up punching a green one-eyed alien in its green one-eyed face. What were the odds of that happening again? It was a bit of a gamble. But he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he didn't take it. Besides, he'd had a very profitable evening. He could afford the flight. Madame Allaire's art exhibition wouldn't know what hit it. Buckle up, Paris. Duggan is coming back.